Thanks for listening to Mall Steakhouse Part 2. I just wanted to give a little feedback and tell you how we appreciated the stories that were sent to us at our email, which is stories@notinthejob.com. It turned out that Jay was the only manager that seemed to care if employees were 16 years old, as we had a lot of people tell us that they were under the age of 16 when they started there. For example, TJ and Corey gave those stories. I had somebody named Dean who explained that his friend got him a job at this steakhouse and then decided to steal pie one day, take it in the bathroom and eat it, where he was caught by one of the managers and fired immediately. And to add insult to injury with his firing, he had to wait out in the mall for Dean to finish his shift because Dean was his ride home. And then finally, Chuck told us a story about, I told a lot of stories, but he told us a story about people working the grill and putting the tongs over the hot part of the grill and then moving them over so that when a new person came out to work on the grill, they'd burn themselves as soon as they grabbed the tongs. And I have to tell you, I kind of wish I had a time machine because I missed on that one, and we would have definitely done that for sure. So anyway, thanks everybody for giving us your thoughts and feedback. And if you have any other thoughts or feedback, don't forget to send them to stories@notinthejob.com. And enjoy Mall Steakhouse Part 2. Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
No matter what type of job you've had, there were situations that happened to you during work that you couldn't wait to tell your friends about.
We interview a variety of guests about some of their crazy stories from work, from entry-level food service industry jobs to doctors and attorneys. We will explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced while on the job.
Keep in mind that our guests or the companies they work for may be masked in order to protect the innocent, or maybe even the guilty. On today's show, we continue our conversation about the Mall Steakhouse. We have with us today someone who worked at that Mall Steakhouse with us named Jeff. Hello, Jeff.
Hello.
And Chris, of course, is going to tell us more stories that maybe he held back on the first episode.
Well, one thing that we didn't talk about, and this included all three of us when we were together the other day talking about it, is remember when our buddy Ron, the manager, decided that he was going to hire us to paint
let's paint the story the right way here.
Right.
He didn't want to pay union people real wages, so he thought, how can I take advantage of a bunch of 16-year-old doofuses?
Right, and we're pretty sure that corporate gave him a budget, and he probably pocketed the difference, right?
That's my guess.
I'm sure that that's what happened. So he pulls us aside and goes, "Hey guys, I got a great opportunity for you guys." I think at the time we're making like $3.50 an hour. Mm-hmm. You know,
wait a minute, you made that much?
Oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to say anything. If I remember right, didn't we get paid a little bit extra maybe because it was overnight?
Yeah, because we were working from 11 p.m. until 4 in the morning.
Right.
And then had to go back to work at 10.
Right. I'm pretty sure that child labor laws never entered his mind back in the mid-'80s, right?
There may have been some extra money that came out of the fountains, though, during that, too.
Yeah, that, I think, is the interesting part. If you don't learn anything from this episode, it's you must always, and I mean always, have supervision for 16-year-old boys, because I was working back there, probably cleaning some paintbrushes, and I see my friend Jeff run over, and he grabs like this strainer that we would put vegetables in, and it's got a long stick on it. You know, it's this big like strainer, and he runs past me. He goes, "Move, move, move." I don't know what he's doing. I just moved out of his way. And about 5 minutes later, I'm out towards the front of the mall, or the store where the mall is, and we couldn't even get through the door. I think, did you go through the window? And we didn't have windows. It was just like these chain link fences.
Yeah, it was like it wasn't a window per se, but there was like these wooden
opening. Like
wooden slats there or whatever, yeah.
And it had these giant chains which you could open up and go through. And I'm hearing from the mall, hey, guys, come out here. I'm like, what in the hell is that? So we go out, and I see Jeff out there with his pants rolled up, standing in the fountain, and he's like, there's got to be hundreds of dollars worth of change in here. He's got that strainer just straining the fountain.
Oh yeah, we had to get a spatula or something too to try to get it off the bottom. But we had one lookout for the old Paul Blart mall security guy or whatever, but
Yeah. The mall security, they were not friends of mine, I can tell you. I don't know which one of you two was with me, but there was a time because, again, we were wayward youth, and we got this idea. I had this little MG midget, and I thought, you know what we ought to do? We ought to drive my car in the mall. I mean, it's small enough. And so we drove it up to the edge, right where you'd have this big sliding glass door we could get in. And my car was small enough I could fit around, the big stoppers where, no big trucks could go through. And we just started opening the gate and mall security comes by. And this guy goes, "What in the hell are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Well, I think there's like a car show or something in here, right?" And he just knew we were just full of crap. So he said, "I don't know what you guys are doing, but you're going to take this car and you're going to get it out of here." And he was just kind of whipped up. And me being, a real smart ass, I said, "Take it easy, Barney Fife. We'll back it out of here. It'll be fine." So, that got some giggles. We left. And about 2 weeks later, I'm late getting to work. So I drive all the way up to where, we're not supposed to park, but it's closer, so I wouldn't be as late.
by the trash compactor.
That's right. So I park all the way up there. I go in, I work my shift, and I come out, and, it's 11:30 at night, and I can see there's a yellow thing under my windshield. I'm like, holy shit, I've got a ticket. I'm thinking, who's ticketing in a public parking lot? And I go over and look, and it was from mall security. And this guy said, "The next time I find you here, I'm going to give you a ticket or I'm going to have you towed." And it was signed. And then it said, "Make sure you park in the employee parking." It was signed Barney Fife. So, yeah, at least he had a sense of humor. But they were definitely not on our side.
Oh, no. They did not. And because we'd go out and throw footballs and frisbees and stuff after closing time. But
so I have to back up here. We jumped ahead into some antics. Jeff, how did you start?
I wish I remembered exactly. I think one of you two were working there first and told me about the job there. Because I think before that, I was trying to think where I was working at before that. But yeah, it sounded like, all the cool people are working there. So
Damn right they were.
and it was interesting because in the area where we grew up or whatever, that the mall location was kind of in between a number of like 3 different high schools. So it was kind of unique when you think about like now. I mean, we had kids all working together, if they went to parochial school or one of the other public schools or whatever close by, but we all, everybody kind of worked at that mall because it was kind of centrally located or whatever for that. So I think it opened up, us having a pretty big friend group from all over or whatever.
Yeah, it was clearly a microcosm of society. I mean, we had people from every socioeconomic class and scale. The kids from the Catholic school usually seemed to be a little more well off. And then we had, people who just clearly were not as well off. But that was the interesting thing. I know when we talk about what was it like when you worked at this Mall Steakhouse, if you've ever seen the movie Waiting, and I'm not sure if anybody who's worked at a steakhouse from the mall is going to listen to this, if they're going to have any camaraderie to this. But when I was asked to check out the movie Waiting with Ryan Reynolds, there are so many similarities to what we went through when we worked at this steakhouse. I mean, the age group was between 16 and 40 for the most part.
60 maybe.
Or 60, but the ones that hung out usually 16 to 40. Every payday, the question was, whose apartment are we going to and what do I have to bring? Because everybody was bringing beer, and it didn't matter that you were 16. People were like, "Okay, what do you want?" Everybody was hanging out. And it was just constantly a party. But I will say, as I mentioned in one of the prior episodes, we worked hard. I mean, you learned so much from that business. This business, I will tell you, was owned by a corporate entity of General Mills, who owned a lot of different restaurants. And this one was run clearly like a business. And when you got done working, you knew you put in a full day.
Oh, yeah. When I worked, the majority of time there was, you guys can correct me if I forget wrong, but there were 2 different sides. So there you had like a cold side and a hot side to this. And it was cafeteria style steakhouse. And I worked primarily on the cold side. I don't know how I got shafted into that while everybody else got to work on cooking on the grill or whatever. So you would take the orders and do salads and that kind of stuff. And then there was people, not the people grilling the food, that worked on the other side and got you all your accoutrements that went with your stuff or whatever. But I do remember it being the unique thing about it was I think that was probably one of my first jobs where I worked with like adults.
Right.
And so you had, people that was their full-time job. And, these are adult people that have, some of them had kids, and so it was interesting, I think, just to, we were there just as a job, in high school, but a lot of these people, it was their actual career too. And
yeah, and I think that might have, and I'm maybe speaking for you guys or not here, but I think that might have actually helped us a little bit because they made it very clear there is a career progression there. And you started bussing tables, and that taught you how to organize and do it quick. And then you went to the dishwasher, and then you could go to the hot side or something. And honestly, Jeff, I think you were on the cold side. That was one of the pristine positions people wanted because of the rest of us are like in Dante's Inferno and shit, like dealing with the hot steak and, everything going on there. But it definitely gave you progression to work. And you did see that, man, that is a professional thing. Cause like one of the guys, Tom, that worked there on the grill, he was a grown ass man.
mm-hmm.
And he was very serious about what he did. And it was one of those things where I'd aspire to doing that kind of job.
Yeah, and his family owned like a piano moving business or something. And I mean, I think he worked there helping them out during the days and then would come and work also. But yeah, I mean, there was guys that, every day it was just their thing. They were there to open up and, drink bottles of wine out of the.
Yeah, I did mention on the last episode, I was amazed having now managed people in my career today. And managed people for the past 20 years, I can't believe that an adult would say to a 16-year-old, hey, man, you want something to drink? I mean, it's just amazing to me, but that happened a lot of times. Maybe that was just the 80s.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, I think, a different environment today.
Yes, it definitely is. But I mean, we just learned a lot of different stuff. I mean, that, maybe people aren't even, I mean, I think the restaurant industry's just changed or whatever now from the way we used to do stuff. But I mean, I remember they have 2 or 3 of us, or we probably volunteered to do it. And they're like, hey, we're cleaning the hood tonight. And it's like, oh, yeah, we'll stay. And it's like, that's the worst idea ever. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Those are didn't they do that on Sundays?
Right.
Yeah.
I think we learned pretty quickly, oh, you don't want that last shift on Sunday.
No.
Because they gave you all the shit jobs that they've been putting off because we closed at, 5 or 6 o'clock, depending on the season, where they normally would close at 9 or 10. So they're like, oh, we got 4 extra hours. Now it's time to clean these greasy ass hoods. And
Yeah.
And as the dishwashers, Scott and I had mentioned before that we were the last ones to leave. So you had to wait for everyone to bring all their stuff back. And
I think the worst job ever there was cleaning out that refrigerator area where all the fresh chickens came in, and they were in those wax covered boxes with all the blood in them. It was like, oh, it just smelled so bad.
Yeah, we discussed that. Chris has nightmares to this day about the smell that came off of there because it was probably akin to a morgue, and you just it's just part of the job. And it was like, well, this is what we do. We cook poultry, and we did a lot of it. So it was very popular to have those whole chickens that we would brush that honey glaze over.
Yeah, and that was before you could go in and get the rotisserie chickens and stuff. Now it was like, and I do remember maybe a prank or two where some of the chicken fat or whatever would get into a container and might slide underneath the seat of somebody's car in the middle of the summertime. And they would be looking for where that awful stench was coming from. But
So that was you that did that? Good to know. So, we talked a little bit about the cast of characters that we had there. I'd mentioned it seemed like I worked there for 10 years, but I swear it was probably 2 because you were always working. And, if you were either lucky or unlucky enough to work on, say, like a Mother's Day, that was it. Mother's Day was like the holiday for this steakhouse. And we had, from the second that door opened until we closed, we had to line out the door, and it was so ridiculously, it was a madhouse. And that was before, I mean, credit cards were certainly there, but there was a lot of cash involved.
oh yeah,
And that made it a little sketchy, like, we have to lock this door in the manager's room. But it was just kind of an interesting place to work. We had a cast of characters. we talked about a guy. I don't know if you remember him, Jeff. You have to remember Craig.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how Chris and I almost killed him by accident. It was just, mishap because we thought it would be interesting to throw a gourd into the deep fryer, and then we forgot about it. The gourd exploded after he opened up one of these double-doored Montague ovens, and thank God the oven took the brunt of the hot grease. But is it my imagination, or was there a time where Craig was cooking one day and he caught himself on fire?
I do remember that. I can't remember the exact details of it, but I don't know if I was there for the actual gourd thing, because we used to have, and that probably just came from the decorations because they would bring in seasonal stuff or whatever.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But I remember we tried deep frying everything. It was like way before like the county fair stuff or whatever. We were like, hey, let's try this and drop it in there.
I think when Craig caught himself on fire, you know what it is, because it's this big open flame grill. And it was super busy and something flamed up. And remember, they had to wear those sweet chef hats?
Yeah.
And they were real kind of floppy. So I think he was kind of bent over and this thing flamed up and it caught his hat on fire. But he didn't know right away. I mean, it was literally like a Funniest Home Video, right?
Yeah.
He's still cooking. Meanwhile, the
Craig,
hat's getting hotter and
you're
hotter.
on fire. Yeah.
And then I think his exact quote was, "Ooh, my hat's on fire. I almost died."
Yeah. I'll tell you, General Mills did a really good job with this restaurant, although there's only one left. And it's personally owned. It's not owned by General Mills. Now, General Mills had a variety of other restaurants. They did not stand the test of time either. Some of those include, I don't know if you guys remember any of these, the Betty Crocker Pie Shop. I got nothing there. The Treehouse Restaurants, Hanahan's. Yes, you remember this one. Casa Gallardo Mexican.
Oh, yeah, there was one of those in the same mall.
That's right. I did get the worst case of food poisoning ever from Casa Gallardo many moons ago. And then Good Earth Healthy Foods, they were just ahead of their time, evidently, because that would probably fly today, but didn't work probably in the 80s. And of the 14 restaurant concepts that General Mills acquired, 2 of them were huge successes and continue on today. You know what those are?
One of them is Red Lobster.
Yep,
It is.
That's what I was going to guess.
And the other one? Olive Garden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Red Lobster now has over 55,000 employees and 749 restaurants as of 2019. Olive Garden operates over 900 restaurants, and both chains are opened in multiple countries. So they figured that out for both of those chains, how to make those work. Maybe the place we worked at, maybe their expansion model of being in malls wasn't necessarily the best idea, because we all know what happened to all the malls as the 90s came rolling around.
Well, and if you remember right, when we worked there, Central Ohio really didn't have much as far as restaurants go. It was either fast food or super high end. You didn't have that middle of the road. And then I think what really helped the demise to this steakhouse was you had places like Cheddar's and Cookers and all these types of restaurants started to open up. Now there was a choice for that middle of the road type of meal. And then with the mall hours, they were kind of hosed, like on Sundays, right? You know, they're closing at 5 o'clock, where they probably could have stayed open till 7 or so on other
And when you think about it too, you'd really have to have a hankering for this steak, because you're putting in some effort to go to the mall, to park, to walk to get there, or you can just go to TGI Fridays, walk 20 yards, stuff your face.
But I think in the late 80s, that era, that was a destination. I mean, I think people went to the mall and you'd walk around and look in all the different shops. And I mean, and there was another place not too far from where we grew up that was kind of like the first outdoor, same type of thing in the continent shops or whatever. And you would walk around there and they had restaurants and things like that. It was more open than a mall was. But I truly think it was, it was kind of a destination place at that time. Whether you were going to shop and you would go to like a Wendy's or, one of the other fast food places there, but it was literally like, the place where everybody went. And I mean, that was when you would drop your kids off and leave them, and come back 3 or 4 hours later and pick them up. And nowadays you wouldn't think of doing that, but
No.
I mean, I would, but
Well, I think they've asked you to quit doing that at the local mall where you live. I can tell you, if my parents dropped me off at the mall, which, again, being raised by wolves, that never happened. But when I would walk to the mall, if I wasn't working at the steakhouse, all my money was going directly to Aladdin's Castle. It had nothing to do with any kind of steakhouse, or even across the road from that or across the aisle was Wendy's. Oh, I was shoving every penny I had in Aladdin's Castle. I could retire today with all the money I spent.
I think you spent a fair amount at Spencer's or whatever too, though.
Yeah, I mean, there were some good places there. I know Jeff liked to shop at Merry-Go-Round for his clothes, but yeah, it's just funny, those 80s malls, and looking back on it, you go to a mall today, it just doesn't even seem the same. You can get crowds in there, but it's almost like there's something missing in the atmosphere.
It is. And I think, it was just even the stores and stuff that were there, because you'd have like stores like Florsheim shoes or whatever. Like, you wouldn't think of, that as, hey, I'm going to go out to this fancy shoe store or whatever now. It's like, but it was interesting because, I think there was several other shops in the mall where we knew like girls that went to other high schools worked at like the pretzel place or
Demetrio's.
Yeah.
They had all the hot girls at Demetrio's.
Yeah, that's where they hired all the good-looking young ladies. It's a little creepy looking back on it now because all those really hot ladies that they hired were, 15 and 16 years old. But
Right.
Well, and then like I remember when the Limited or Express first opened up in the mall, and it was like, everybody was working there. It's like, oh, geez.
yeah, I know on occasion, once we figured this out, and you guys are going to have to help me with the name of the store, there was a chocolate chip cookie store, and I can't think of the name of it, but we would run there after work because we knew when they closed, if you went to buy, I don't know, a pound of cookies and it was the end of the night, they were like, here, just take the rest of them. And, you could take home 4 or 5 pounds of cookies. Do you remember the name of that place?
I do. It was the original cookie company.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. But yeah, there was a few places there, and there's, we were in Central Ohio at the time, and there was a company called Lazarus, and it ended up being part of the Federated Stores and Macy's, and it's not in business anymore, but they created an entire food court in their basement, which started to, cut in on some of the business. I think what's interesting in Central Ohio, where we all grew up, when I went to Northland Mall for the first time, Northland Mall was the most popular spot you could ever go to. And it was probably 5 to 6 years later, they'd opened 2 or 3 other malls, and it seemed like Northland Mall went from the only place to shop to the 5th place you'd ever want to go to. They opened up a mall downtown. They opened up one north of that, out to the east, and they just didn't have the business there anymore, which is part of the problem with the steakhouse we're talking about. They started closing some malls.
And it's funny because the steakhouse that we worked out in the mall was actually outside of the mall originally, and it was a very popular steakhouse. So when it was in like the patio shops or whatever, and my older brothers worked there when it was in the patio shops or whatever. And it was interesting that it actually moved into the mall once the mall kind of became enclosed, because that outdoor patio shops where you could walk around and there was different restaurants and stuff closed up, and everybody kind of switched over to going to the mall at that point.
And it's funny that the 2 guys that opened that store I think they were local to Central Ohio, but they also opened up a place that was competing at one point with McDonald's and Burger King. It was called Burger Chef.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up kind of going by the wayside. So Jeff, I have to bring you back to us working in this Mall Steakhouse. Any other stories that you remember off the top of your head about either funny, scary, customer stories, anything crazy?
I do remember working the day when somebody to my right here was taking a big pan of bacon out of the oven, and all of a sudden I heard him yell or whatever, and I went back there and like all the skin on his arm was sloughed off, hanging down, and I'm like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. We talk about child labor laws. Let me tell you, that job was absolutely dangerous. And it has to be very similar today for everybody that works in these restaurants. But you had war wounds when you worked there because you were constantly working with hot grease. We almost killed Craig. You had, when you clean the knives and everything, and you'd have to go in and sort all the silverware, you would absolutely cut yourself. And sometimes when those dishes would come out of that Hobart dishwasher machine and they came out at like 350 degrees, it would sear your hand open if you grabbed a whole bunch of them to put in the plate warmer, which was ironic since these things were coming out like lava.
Yes, I do remember the plate warmer. And on occasion, I mean, I don't know if either of you two were involved, but these were rolling things it was like spring loaded. And so you would put the plates in there and it basically heated them on the side. So when you put the food on there, but the floor was like a red tile with, guessing it was black grout when it initially started. It was black grout when I was there, but it could have been, I don't know. We put enough bleach on there that, when it was floor cleaning time, I've never seen that much bleach. Every one of us had, the bottoms of your pants was all white from all the bleach. But I remember at least, half a dozen times that somebody would be wheeling out the whole thing full of plates and the whole thing tips over.
Oh,
and it's just like the loudest. And you're just like, there's at least 10 broken plates there. But.
Yeah, being a kid, I did not understand the overhead involved in running a business like that. But when you think about the number of glasses that we broke, the number of silverware things that we bent, the number of knives that we threw in the ceiling that fell and hit people in the head, with all these things, that's got to be so incredibly tough. Not to mention, how much of their, I guess, inventory walks out of there just because, hey, I'm hungry, I'm going to have that slice of pie, or I'm going to have a slice of cake. Now, we had an employee.
Or sirloin tips.
We talked about that before, too. But it's like, I just wonder, we had a small discount. I don't know what it was.
Probably 10%.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
But the meal was only $5.99.
So. Yeah, but $5.99 back then was like $15 today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just can't imagine the kind of overhead you have to run that kind of business.
Allegedly, somebody took a whole cheesecake once and ate it on their way home, too, I think.
I might have been involved with that. I also remember taking a 5-pound bucket of pudding.
Come to think of it, maybe that's why this business isn't around anymore. Yeah.
They would give us stuff all the time, and I don't know why we would take it, because it's like, hey, this is going to be out of date. You can have it. And it's like, oh, okay, we'll take it.
That was a selling point. Which brings me to, just kind of a topic that I looked at since, I personally think everyone should take a stint in the restaurant world. I think it's a good experience. You deal with coworkers, you deal with customers, you deal with managers, and usually a lot of the coworkers, to Jeff's point earlier, you run the gamut of socioeconomic class and age and everything else. But I'm going to read off a few of the dumb reasons workers are fired that was created by thetalco.com. So it's kind of interesting. One of the reasons was taking a bath in the sink at work. I can honestly say I never saw anyone do that.
Nope.
But I think had anybody that we worked with knew that had happened, it would have absolutely taken place.
I think somebody might have got pushed through their dishwasher once or twice, but they definitely weren't bathing in it.
That's true, yes. There was another situation where somebody refused to serve paramedics because they thought they were police officers. Well, I can tell you, nobody was ever refused, ever. And trust me, we had people coming in. I think our favorite customer would come in, and this was a regular guy. He would wait until like Friday at 8:58, and we closed at 9, and he would walk down that cold side and make his order, and it was like T-bone, extra well done. And you could just hear everyone go, oh my gosh, we're going to be here another 40 minutes. Another person's been fired for being honest about the food quality. But I can tell you, the place I work, I thought the food was awesome.
Yeah.
And so did everybody else.
For sure.
That's kind of an interesting concept for me, but I guess if you're that honest. Fighting with coworkers. You guys remember any fights at the Mall Steakhouse?
Yeah, I mean, I remember a few. Nothing that was like anybody getting killed over anything, and it was interesting because we didn't have servers per se, but we had hosts, and the host would still get like tips. And so, occasionally if you had two hosts, if it was really busy or whatever, they might, get in a little scuffle over, oh, that was my table. I sat them. And
well, that's proof that you worked there longer than me, because when I was there was a very clear policy at this steakhouse, and that was no tipping. And that ended up changing at some point. And I did hear stories about, customers maybe even picking up the tips, which caused all kinds of consternation with the employees.
Yeah, because I think the host just like basically refilled drinks and
right.
And on occasion, if the food wasn't quite ready when they hooked the corner, then you'd have to send it out, so they would take it out to them. But it wasn't really like a full service type.
And then I remember you had to take it back when they complained, or get the mushroom gravy off of it or whatever. So.
Well, another dumb reason people get fired in restaurant work, reporting health problems to the authorities. Now, Jeff, you're going to have to back us up on this, or maybe you have a different recollection, but the time that I worked at this steakhouse, I'm telling you what, every month, I think it was, we would put out all this plastic. We had to pull all the dishes and put them up on the dishwasher, and we put plastic over everything, and they sprayed. I don't ever remember seeing any kind of rodent, animal, gnat, fly, bee, nothing.
Never saw a single insect or rodent there, period. I mean,
Yeah.
you would outside the mall or whatever, by the dumpsters or whatever there, but never. That was amazing in that restaurant. And I mean, I think it was part of that was that we really did have a pretty strict cleaning thing or whatever, to the demise of all of our clothing at some point. Because we did use bleach like it was going out of style to clean stuff then. And
Except for the employee bathroom, which was the worst, the worst 10 square feet I've ever been in my life.
Did it have a door?
yes.
Okay. I don't
think it
recall
had
a door.
a knob on it. I think it had.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It was almost like a little, I don't know, coat room with a bathroom attached to it. And it was just disgusting. There were coats and clothing and stuff from people who hadn't worked there for months. It looked like somebody just, a homeless
that's where,
shelter.
like, all the aprons went to hang from people that left, and
Yeah, never cleaned aprons, and they smelled wonderful. All right, another reason people get fired: eating the food.
We probably should have been fired quite a bit.
Yeah,
there were some of the bussers that were brave enough that they would eat like the stuff they were bringing back.
Oh
And
my
I was-
gosh, I forgot
just
about
never
that.
could do that. It was like, oh, this half-eaten steak on here. I'm gonna eat that, and I'm
yeah,
like,
this looks pretty good. Yeah, we would have. I never did that because I'm a little too much of a germaphobe for that, and that's saying something because I worked in probably the dirtiest area back in the dishwasher, but I couldn't imagine eating something off somebody's plate. Like, that's just insane, but it clearly happened a lot, and I can remember a few people's names that would do things like that, and they were absolute characters as well. Another reason, criticizing your employer online. Well, there was no online, so I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but that's something we didn't have to deal with. But then the last reason I have here that people are fired is giving their friends food, the hookup. And I'm sure that happened a lot.
Oh, for sure.
yeah. I never worked. I don't think I ever worked the register or whatever there. But you could, if people came in or whatever, you could, kind of give them the hookup or bring stuff out to them or something like that. At that point in time, I think the statute of limitations run out right now. But yeah, I don't think any of us ever worked the register. I couldn't have told you how to ever work the register there. That was always,
Those managers are pretty smart.
They had, they had people that strictly did that.
But I just want to do a call back to the last episode. Now, Jeff wasn't part of that last episode, but I'm curious if he remembers our buddy Ron, the manager, called us into the office and said that they had caught some people stealing, and what should we do about it? What is our advice? And we were like, fire them,
Yes.
fire them. And lo and behold, it was you and I.
I do remember that. Yes, we were like, oh, you should totally get rid of them. And he's like, it's you two. And we're like, never mind. We're just kidding.
Psych.
We had some good managers there, though. I can't, there's no way I'd ever remember all the names and stuff. But yeah. There was some. And I think a lot of people that was kind of their first start in the restaurant industry. And so that was interesting that, they were kind of coming in new and they were looking to us to, it was like, oh, this guy doesn't know anything. We can tell him this is the way you do it.
Well, in this particular restaurant we're talking about has somewhat of a cult following. And a lot of it is people that used to work there, but there's a lot of people that used to eat there that still follow this business. I can tell you it makes sense that there were a lot of people who kind of cut their teeth in the restaurant business because General Mills did not play around. They had a playbook to everything. Like they literally worked right through, like, here's how you manage this. And they had a book of how to operate. So I've seen some managers talk about, it was the greatest job ever. Guaranteed they worked hard and they played hard, but it was definitely a learning experience.
Yeah. And I just remember, I mean, I think there was a lot more don't remember how many of this particular restaurant there were locally, but the trucks would come in, and it was a General Mill. It was some other company, but it was like the truck that supplied all those. And so we'd try to go and sneak on there and get stuff from like Red Lobster, and get a bag of this or whatever but yeah, it was all, kind of set up, and they would order. I remember, the managers going around and ordering stuff, each week. And we had specials or whatever too. And I can't remember, like it would be like seasonal or whatever. Cause I remember sometimes we would absolutely hate. It's like, oh, it's, $4 sirloin tips or,
there'd be a run,
or, fish was on special, or
fish almondine.
Yes.
Don't ask me why that just popped in my mind.
Yes. The fish was really good there too.
Honestly, I don't think there was anything that was really that bad, unless if you don't like, broccoli or whatever, then you're not going to like broccoli there. But it was really good. And if you figure out who we're talking about, I've been to the place that still exists. It's a time warp. It is wonderful, but you do kind of get the bends when you walk in there, because you're like, whoa, this is just like being in 1985. But the food is fantastic. All right. Well, we're nearing the end of our episode today. Chris, what have we learned?
I've learned that a strainer is a good tool for stealing change out of the mall fountain.
That is true. Jeff, you agree with that?
Yes, it works.
Anything else that
you might need a spatula or something too, just to get them off the bottom.
Anything you learned today, Jeff?
Don't volunteer to paint.
Yes.
At 16 years old, when that was probably a $10,000 job to a painter, and I think we made $10.
Right. Yeah, that was probably about
But
it.
we got free soda the whole time we did it. So.
It was worth every bit of it for that reason. And I will tell you that finally, I would say that anybody who has 16-year-olds working for them, supervise the hell out of them. Do not let them out of your sight, or they'll turn out doing a lot of the stuff we've talked about in this episode. So that about wraps it up for today's episode. For Chris Kiernan and Jeff, this is Scott McLaughlin saying, we'll see you at work.
Thank you for listening to Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you would like to share, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.